Hi everyone, I'm Bia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. If you are new to Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and is more relatable to us as teenagers in today's society. So we have been reading through the Gospel according to Spiritism together, and in the Gospel according to Spiritism, they take a section from the Bible, right, and things that Jesus said, and explain them in terms that are easier for us to understand, because as we know, Jesus spoke in allegories, right? He spoke in short stories, and he didn't just say the direct message, he kind of put it into a story, and a lot of people get confused along the way of what Jesus actually meant. So here, the spirits are getting what Jesus said and clarifying and saying, this is exactly what he meant by this is what we should be doing, because clearly, right, people have many different interpretations of what Jesus said. So the spirits are coming to clarify and show us how these little sayings and these little stories that might not seem like they make sense, make a lot of sense and are very applicable to our lives. So last week we started chapter 9, which is Blessed are the meek and the peacemakers. So this is saying how we were talking about last week, how we have to be kind to one another, right? To everyone, even if we're kind to someone, but then we talk bad about them, that's still being mean, right? That's still not trying to have peace with that person and being in harmony with that person. So we talked a lot about having that, right? A lot of times, right, we can't help it but to talk bad about people or to make fun of people, but we need to try and be peaceful, right? And realize that, okay, we're looking at that little problem in someone else, but what about the problems that we're having, right? What are we going through? What do we need to fix? So with this section of the peacemakers, right, talking about being peaceful and not fighting and not talking bad about people, not being mean to people. We got to the section that we left off is obedience and resignation. The doctrine of Jesus constantly teaches obedience and resignation, two virtues that are the companion of mildness and activity, although man wrongly confuses them with the denial of sentiment and free will. Obedience is the consent of reason. Resignation is the consent of the heart. Both are active forces, since they carry the burden that has fallen upon them due to foolish revolt. The coward cannot be resigned any more than the prideful and selfish can be obedient. Jesus was the very incarnation of these virtues, which are despised by material antiquity. He came to earth at a time when Roman society was perishing in the failing of corruption. He came so that, even in the bosom of depressed humanity, the triumph of sacrifices and the renouncement of sensuality would shine forth. So that passage there was a little confusing, but if we break it down, we can see everything that they were trying to get at here. So here what they're saying is that Jesus always teaches about virtues such as obedience and resignation. And what can be confusing is that people think, oh, to be obedient, that means I don't have free will. I have to listen to what everyone else is saying. Or resignation is to not have sentiment, or to just do whatever, right? Other people are telling you to do and not have your own sentiment, your own ideas. But what they're saying here is, right, the coward cannot be resigned and the selfish cannot be obedient. So there's more to it. It's not about losing your free will, but realizing when someone's right, realizing when someone's above you, realizing when you should follow someone. And we know there's always someone above us, right? Because we know Jesus and God above all will always be above us. So there's always someone, right? Like even God's laws that we have to be obedient to. There's always that thing that's more than us. We're not at the top. And in terms of us compared to God, we'll never be at that level. So we're always going to be obedient to those rules. So that doesn't mean we lose our free will, but that is the right path for us to take, is to be obedient with those rules. And then in terms of resignation, if we look up the definition of resignation, it's the acceptance of something undesirable but inevitable. So they're saying to teach resignation means, okay, so you want me to just accept something, even though it's not desirable, to just go along with it, to almost like give up, right? But it's not that. It's realizing that, like they're saying, the coward cannot be resigned. So if you're scared, you're not going to, or if you only believe in your thoughts and you don't think about anything else, you're scared, even selfish, right? You're not going to admit to these undesirable things, even if that's what's necessary, even if that's what's inevitable, right? But those things are going to happen. Undesirable things are going to happen, and we just have to take that the best we can. So it's not saying that we're going to lose our sentiment or lose our free will to make our own decisions, to follow our own things, to do what we want. But there's certain guidelines that, yeah, that's our model, right? That's our standard for what we're following. So just because you're resigning or because you're accepting something that's undesirable doesn't mean that you're giving into that thing, doesn't mean that that thing's controlling you, but it's just maybe that's what's best, right? And we know, like our trials, right? They're not desirable. If we wanted, we would want to be happy all the time and not have to go through struggles. But these struggles are necessary. So instead of resisting them, realizing, okay, if I go through this test, if I go through this struggle, I'll benefit after, right? So even if that was undesirable, it's inevitable, right? We need to go through that to learn. So we go through that and we learn, but with that open heart, right? They're saying the consent of the heart. So being open with your heart and understanding, okay, yes, this is going to happen. Let me accept it so we can get past it, learn from it, and move on. It's not that we're just blindly accepting this. Then it continues. Thus, each epoch is marked with the same stamp of the virtue or vice that has either to save or to lose. The virtue of your generation is intellectuality. The vice is moral indifference. I merely use the word activity because a genius may suddenly rise up and discover for themselves the horizons that will be seen by the multitude only at a later date, whereas activity denotes the reunion of the endeavors of everyone in order to reach a somewhat less brilliant conclusion, but one that will confirm the intellectual elevation of an epoch. Submit yourselves then to the impulsion we have come to give your spirits. Obey the great law of progress that is promised of your generation. Woe to the lazy ones. Woe to all those who are not open to understanding. Woe to them, because we, who are the guides of humanity on this march, shall apply the whip and subdue the rebellion by means of the double action of brake and spur. All prideful resistance will have to be overcome sooner or later. However, blessed be all those who are mild, for they will lend yielding ears to these teachings. Lazarus, Paris, 1863. So here they're saying how every time period has like that virtue that a lot of people are understanding, a lot of people have, and that vice, right? That negative thing that a lot of people have. And here they're saying for our generation, and this book was written a little while ago, but not too far ago, that the generation, right, our virtue is intellectuality. So, right, we have this intelligence. We are learning so much more. But the vice is moral indifference. So while we have this intellectuality and we have this intelligence, we're not using our morals. We're not using, right, our moral laws and how we're treating one another, how we're treating ourselves. And all of our morals aren't there. So while our intelligence is growing, our morals are not. And what they're saying here is that it doesn't have to be intellectuality as someone discovers some great thing that's never going to be, it's too advanced to explain to other people, right? So maybe you have a professor or a teacher who discovered something incredible, but it's so advanced that only a few other people are going to understand it and comprehend it. But having the intelligence to even discover something that's more general and might almost seem like common sense, but that a lot of people can understand it, that's what's going to be valuable right now, right? To improve right now. And that's where we step in, right? We step in because we find those things, right? Those things that it's not a great discovery, but like they said here, a less brilliant conclusion. So it's still something great that we need to be reminded of. Everyone needs to be reminded of. And it's a simple thing that maybe people aren't thinking of, right? And just by a simple change, it sparks a big thing. So even if we think about examples today, right, with plastic straws, everyone used plastic straws and no one even cared about them. Then they started this movement to stop using plastic straws, and now a lot of places are eliminating plastic straws, or eliminating plastic straws and making alternatives, right? Metal straws, silicone, I've seen straws made out of corn, so many different types. So it's just this little thing that we need to discover, bring to people, right? Saying, look at all these bad things that all these plastic straws are doing, and then the change comes, because that's something simple that everyone can comprehend, everyone can get on board. So that's what they're saying. That's what our job is. And of course, the straws is great, but also with our morals, right? And with everything we do, even if we're just influencing our friends or the people around us. And we don't have to lecture them, but just lead by example, right? And show them what we're doing will start a pattern. And in the end, that'll be helping us, because those who are lazy, right? Those who are not open to understanding, they're the ones, eventually they're going to have to understand. Eventually they're going to have to stop being lazy. But we're the ones that are working hard, that are going to progress, right? Moving on this law of progress. And now we're on to the next section in this chapter, which is anger. Pride induces you to judge yourself to be more than you are, and to repel any comparison that might discredit you. Rather, you consider yourself to be so far above your fellow brothers and sisters, spiritually speaking, in social positions, or even in personal advantage, that the least parallel irritates and annoys you. What happens then? You give away anger. So here they're saying, right, we have pride and we want to be the best. And then when there's someone else, right, in comparison with us, someone close to us, we see that person in an advantage, right, in some type of advantage, we get jealous, right, because we have pride of what we're doing. So they're saying, what happens? You start giving away anger. Anything that person does, you start giving out anger, right, and hate towards that person. Investigate the origin of these outbursts of passing dementia, which make you resemble a savage by losing your self-position and reason. And if you do, then you will almost always be faced with the hurt pride. Perchance, it is not pride which has been hurt by a contradiction, which makes you repel justifiably observations and angrily reject the wisest counsel? Even impatient originating from contraries are often childish ones, come from the importance which each individual gives to their own personality, before which it has been given to understand that everyone should bow down. So here they're saying, right, investigate when you have this feeling that you just have these outbursts of like anger and hate towards someone for no reason. Trace it back and you'll see that it comes back to your own hurting pride, right? Something else is hurting your pride, and that's what's making you angry. That's what's making you feel these emotions. And if you really come down to it, you'll see that there's nothing to be angry about, right? It's just us being selfish and prideful and mean. And that's what they're saying here. So anytime you get angry, think about it and think how that's more of a reflection on you than that other person, right? Because that anger that you're feeling, unless you're physically saying something to that person, which oftentimes we don't, right? Oftentimes we just keep that anger inside. That's doing nothing to the other person. That's only hurting ourselves and draining ourselves of all this energy. And that person knows nothing of it, right? They're just going on doing the best they can do. So we do have to break it down, like they said, and see what's the cause of this anger that we're having and try and fix that within ourselves. And like they said here, oftentimes when we get to that conclusion at the end, we'll see that it was so childish, right? It was a childish little thing that we were being so crazy about. Then it continues. In their frenzy, Wrathful people hurl themselves at everything, from their own savage nature to lifeless objects, breaking them because they do not obey. Ah, if they could but see themselves at these moments, looking on in cold blood. Either they would be afraid of themselves, or they would think themselves simply ridiculous. Imagine then the impression made on others. Even if it is merely out of respect for oneself, it behooves one to make an effort to overcome this inclination, which only makes one into a pitiful object. So here, right, they're saying when you have this anger coming out of you, right, and when you're like it says here, hurling yourself at people and being savage in nature, right, just all these things that come with being angry, take a look at yourself, right? Like, take yourself out of that moment and take a look at yourself and think of what you look like, right? You look like a crazy person. You look like they're saying, like a savage. And that's not who we are, right? So we need to just get to the root of that and try and fix that, because we don't want to look like that to ourselves or to others, right? Then it continues. If we reflect that anger in no way helps, in fact, it modifies our health even to putting our life at risk, then we would recognize that we are nothing more than our own victim. But above all, there is yet another consideration which should restrain us, that of the unhappiness this kind of behavior brings to all those around us. If we have a heart, would not this anger be a motive for remorse for having caused those we love to suffer? What a terrible moral weight upon us if, in any excess of fury, we were to practice some act which we could deplore for the rest of our lives. So think about that on top of it, right? On top of, okay, you don't care about yourself being angry, you don't care about yourself looking bad. Think about how that anger affects the people around you, right? So if you're super angry about something at school or with your friends, and then you come home, you're going to act that way with your parents, with your family. And your family's not going to be impacted by it, right? Because now you're just being mean to them. They don't know. Now they're upset about it, right? They're suffering from that. And you don't mean it towards them, but you're keeping that anger with you, around you all the time. So we don't want those we love to suffer, right? So there's more than, even if we don't care about ourselves suffering, then what about those around us that are also going to suffer from this anger that we're having for no reason? To summarize, anger does not exclude certain qualities of the heart, but it stops us from doing any good and may cause us to practice great evil. This then should be sufficient to induce mankind to make the necessary effort in order to dominate this trait. Moreover, for those who are Spiritists, there is yet another motive for this solicitation, that of anger being against charity and Christian humility. A Protecting Spirit, Bordeaux, 1863. So again, to summarize, right, anger does not exclude qualities of the heart, and it stops us from doing anything good, right? That's the main thing. If we're having that anger, even if we're not saying it to other people, even if we're not acting on it, we're having that anger is preventing us from doing good things with our lives, right? Because now that's eating away at us, right? We only are thinking about that anger. It's only making us unhappy, and we can't do good things. And it may cause us to do evil, and then it may cause us to act on that anger, whether it's toward the person, towards ourselves, towards someone else, whatever it may be. So, right, so they're saying we need to get this in order, because this anger is only bringing us bad things. So we need to try and focus on that and stop that anger and let it go before it gets out of control. Then it continues. Because of the false idea that it is not possible for a person to reform their own nature, they judge themselves exempt from even trying to correct their defects. This applies especially for those defects in which the person willingly takes pleasure, or those that would take a great deal of perseverance to eradicate. This is why, for example, an individual who is prone to anger almost always finds excuses for this temperament. Instead of confessing themselves guilty, they accuse their organism, and in this manner accuse God for their faults. This is yet one more of the consequence of pride to be found in the midst of our imperfections. So here they're saying, on top of us having this anger, if we start blaming it on other people and saying, yeah, it's because that person did that, it's because, oh, my brain works this way, I always get angry, and so that's God's fault that I'm like this, or just blaming other people and not taking any of the blame to ourselves, right? It's all ourselves. We're the ones that are letting that small situation affect us, having those negative thoughts. That is our fault, right? That's in our control, and we're using it wrong. So again, that's another consequence of being prideful, of not seeing that we do wrong and only seeing the wrong that everyone else is doing, or blaming everyone else for our wrongs. Then it continues. Undoubtedly, there are temperaments that lead themselves more readily than others to violent acts, just as there are muscles that are more flexible than others, so lending themselves better to acts of strength. However, do not believe it is here that the first cause lies, but persuade yourself that a pacific spirit, even when in an ill-tempered body, will always be pacific. Just as much as a violent spirit, even when occupying a lymphatic body, will not be more mild, only that the violence will take on another aspect. In this case, the anger would be more concentrated, just as the first case, the anger would be more expansive. So here they're also thinking, again, it comes back to us, and it comes back to our spirit, right? Our physical body doesn't have this effect that we're pretending it has, like if we're blaming our physical body, right? Because like they're saying, if someone is angry in nature, and even if they go into a body that is disabled and they can't do much, they'll still make that body aggressive in some ways. And if they're not, then that body won't get that aggressive. So how we are, right, how our spirit is affecting our body. So it's not our body that's that aggressive. It's us that has an anger in us, that we're making our body aggressive. Therefore, it is not the body that gives the anger to those who do not already possess it. Likewise, neither does it cause other vices. All virtues and vices are inherited in the spirit. If this were not the case, where would be the merit and responsibility? The person who is bodily deformed can do nothing to remedy this situation, because the spirit takes no part in it. But what can be modified is the actual spirit, when it wants to, by means of a strong desire. Does not experience show you up on what point the power of desire can take you when you look at the truly miraculous transformations happening all around you every day? Then let us convince yourselves that man only remains bound by vices because he so desires. Those who really wish to liberate themselves can always achieve this end. If it were not so, then the law of progress would not be able to exist. Hahnemann, Paris, 1863. So again, they're saying, right, that we're the ones that are in control of this anger. It's not our bodies that gives us the anger, it's us that has the anger. And right, no one who's bodily deformed can remedy the situation, because it's the spirit, right? It's not our body that's being angry and that's acting this way. And then on top of that, right, we can always change. No one is bound to have vices. If we want to change them, and if we don't want to have these vices, these negative qualities, then we can change them, because that's how the law of progress works, right? We're always progressing, and we always have the opportunity to progress. And if we want to improve ourselves, we will. So it's not an excuse that, oh, I'm like this, I'm never going to fix it. No, there's definitely a way to fix it. There's definitely a way to improve. We just have to start working on it ourselves. And it might be hard to work on it, but that's why we have to work on it in little situations, right? In little everyday situations. Start by, when you start to get angry at someone, take a step back and breathe and compose and think about why you're angry and realize that it's over nothing, and then just let go, because that's only hurting yourself and not the other person. So in our daily lives, we can try and put that into practice, because we all get angry over silly little things all the time, and that's exactly what it is. They're silly little things. There's no reason to get angry. There's no reason to have those feelings over this situation. So we should all, including myself, work on that each and every day so we get rid of these vices, like they're saying. So that's where we'll leave off today. But before we leave off, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Picone for today's date, December 3rd. So this one's titled, Studying History. We can chart our future clearly and wisely only when we know the path which has led to the present. We didn't just arrive at this point in our lives. We have a history. We brought us to this place. What brought us to this place? What did we do along the way that turned out to be mistakes? And what things turned out to be wise? Before we make plans for where we want to go next, it's good to look back at the journey we've already taken. We don't have to repeat the same mistakes. Instead, we can use the best ideas we have had in the past to map our way into the future. I'll use my past as a guide to what I'll do next. If at all you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk about at all, feel free to email me at kardecradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.